So yeah, I wanted to ask someone in the gay community now a few questions about,
Sure.
Harvey Milk and what's
Uh-huh.
going on right now.
All right.
So my first question is, what was it like to work on the ACT UP AIDS crisis?
Well, that I was quite young at the time, so that was the late '80s and early '90s, and I was just coming out of the closet. I was just kind of figuring out who I was and what my story was, and I learned it was really a shock to learn that our democracy, our elected leaders, and the major institutions that were there to serve us and help us as citizens and as people didn't care about the fact that literally thousands upon thousands of people were getting sick, were dying, were losing their health care insurance, were losing their homes, were getting fired. No one, even in the early days, even hospitals were afraid to take care of people. There was no research that was happening to study the disease, and people, members of the gay community in particular, but other people as well who were affected by HIV and AIDS were had stigma. They were scorned. They were blamed for their own illness. A lot of people thought they deserved what they got. So I became very upset and very angry. ACT UP, the AIDS Coalition to Unleash Power, was really fueled by a lot of righteous indignation, a lot of anger, there's a lot of energy, which was really useful in that time because it was very motivating to help propel us to do things that we needed to do to put pressure on elected officials, to put pressure on institutions in all kinds of different ways. Some of what we did, of course, was very visible in the form of street protests and what we call street theater, guerrilla politics, that sort of thing. Just to create media, create pressure, create tension, create larger public conversation around these issues. But there are many, many other things that we did as ACT UP, or just as GLBT people, just to try to change hearts and minds and change society and change institutions. And they're too numerous to mention now, but we got involved in trying to elect candidates who would support our issues, educate them on our issues, try to defeat candidates who are opposed to us, try to engage in policy initiatives to change the major policies that affected our lives. So a big part of it was just coming out of the closet, because HIV/AIDS was a function of homophobia. Homophobia is a function of the closet. It's a function of fear and ignorance and people just not knowing that they know gay people, they love gay people, they just don't know that they know and love gay people. So living with courage and authenticity and openness, that was a big, big part of our movement, coming out, being seen, being courageous. I, for example, was an ACT UP, was kind of a street activist, but I also worked in the corporate sector at the same time. So during the day I wore a suit, a briefcase, and in the corporate sector, Fortune 500, very conservative company in downtown Minneapolis, I came out, I started engaging my executive level staff and pressuring them to change their corporate policies. So anyway, that's a long-winded answer.
Okay.
Sorry.
And the second one, I read on your website that you have been abused by police, like at protests.
That was horrible. Also kind of a very formative and seminal experience for me. It happened more than once, and that was in the context of ACT UP. So the one in particular that was the worst experience was, I don't know when this was exactly, 1989 or 90, 91, something like that. ACT UP Minneapolis, or ACT UP Twin Cities, decided to go down to the Aquatennial Torchlight Parade, and kind of go into the parade and not really disrupt the parade or stop it or do anything like that or lay down in the street or anything like that. We just wanted to go into the parade and hand out leaflets and flyers and just to create greater awareness. We had done what we thought was the responsible thing, which was to alert the police to what we were going to do so that they could we're not
Yeah.
surprised, and B, we thought it would all happen, they would give us the opportunity to exit the parade, or choose to be arrested. There's this whole like thing in civil disobedience and being arrested, blah, blah, blah. This is a longer conversation, but what the Minneapolis Police Department opted to do was deploy the squad that does like emergency entrances into drug houses, things like that, the SWAT team, and they were very, very, very aggressive in their response towards us, and in a very brutal way tackled us and abused us, and then continued to abuse us as they dragged us down to City Hall. I was treated plenty badly, but my then partner was really brutalized and injured by the police, and then thrown in jail and had to be in jail overnight. So that was terrible. But what ended up happening as a result of that was that we formed a coalition with communities of color, who of course have been receiving bad treatment. I mean, gay people have been abused by police for many years, but the African American experience is qualitatively different and much worse. And so we formed a coalition. All these police brutality issues were really becoming a focus of a lot of activism and attention in Minneapolis at the time. And so we joined together. There was a big push in the form of this organization, the Coalition for Police Accountability, to form much better accountability and oversight and transparency into dealing with police misbehavior. And we pressured the mayor and the city council members to form the Civilian Review Authority for the purpose of reviewing these complaints about police brutality and dealing with them in a better, more transparent investigatory manner, and recommending discipline to the chief of police. So, again, a very negative experience. I think we transformed into an opportunity to engage our democracy in pushing for change.
Okay, next big question is, how do you think Harvey Milk's work impacts you today?
Well, of course, he was a huge figure in history, one of the very, very early out elected officials who achieved some measure of political success. And so just those early pioneers served as a source of inspiration to someone like me, to open up a whole world of possibility that maybe you didn't realize was available to you when you first come out. As a gay, when I was a young gay person, I struggled with a lot of issues of inferiority and self-confidence and self-esteem, because you're told a lot of things, either explicitly or implicitly, that who and what you are is not as good as what being normal is, and you internalize that, and you begin to doubt your ability to bring your best self. You have a choice, either live this terrible life, or because that's what being gay meant, or trying to live your life as a lie in a closet, and it's just you just told all these negative messages. And so someone like Harvey Milk, and I have to say for the record, he was not the first out gay person. First out gay legislator is actually Alan Spear, who's my mentor and predecessor in this seat. He was the first out gay legislator in the country, and a huge hero to me, and a very, very good friend. And so just opening up a world of possibility, of hope, of knowing that you can be courageous and achieve something and make a difference, and bring your best talents to the world. It's a wonderful story about Alan. He came out, of course, in 1974, a long time ago. He was elected in 72, came out in 74. One of my best friends was 14 or 15 at the time, at the most, and had heard about Alan Spear, figured out where he lived, and he by this time already knew that he was gay, but also was petrified by that. Felt bad about it. Got on his bike. Alan lived at that time over near the University of Minnesota. My friend lived down by Diamond Lake. Got on his bike, Alan's house and just rode by his house just to see where Alan's beer lived, because that was Alan and coming out, and he was like pretty much the only out person, public figure that my friend knew about, and that's all he needed was to feel good about just rode his bike by Alan's house, and that gave him enough hope to to finish school and go on to what was a brilliant career. Unfortunately, my friend passed away a couple years ago, but he had a brilliant career as a communications professional.
Was he also a gay man?
Yeah, he was a gay kid, and became a gay man. Yeah.
Okay. Next question is, what was your process to make gay marriage legal in Minnesota?
Well, it's a long story. I don't know if you have enough videotape or not. This actually goes all the way back to the early days of my coming out, my activism. The early part of our work, of course, was really focused on individual civil liberties and human rights and anti-discrimination laws and that sort of thing. So when I first came out, there was nothing that protected us from discrimination, legal discrimination. So we could be fired from our job, we could be kicked out of our home. Police could treat us any way they wanted on this basis. We had no legal recourse whatsoever. Minneapolis actually had an ordinance, but St. Paul didn't. Nowhere else in the state did. And so, without getting too deep in the weeds, we worked very, very hard on first making sure that St. Paul's ordinance, they had an ordinance, but then it was repealed, and then we restored the ordinance. That's a long story. Anita Bryant was a part of that story. You can look her up. You remember Anita Bryant?
Yes, I do.
And so people really understood that idea, and most people, so we worked on St. Paul, and then we kind of trained our focus on passing an amendment to the Human Rights Act to include GLBT people in the non-discrimination laws of our state. We succeeded at doing that in 1993, and then we started thinking about ourselves as family and familial units, and so then we started talking about what that meant in terms of fairness and non-discrimination and equality of opportunity and safe, stable, secure lives, being able to provide for each other, being able to provide for our children. And the early part of that conversation was around, we started in places where we thought we could make a difference in the short term. Ultimately, we couldn't quite dream of the future, but we did talk about ultimately we do want to get married. We thought, seems like a kind of a radical idea, a really big step, a tremendous change. Maybe we'll get there in 50 years. But in the meantime, let's talk about Minneapolis, a progressive city, has several thousand, probably 8,000 employees. A certain number of them are gay, a certain number of them have partners, and their partners need things like health insurance, just like someone's spouse needs health insurance. So let's see if we can't get the domestic partners of City of Minneapolis employees to be able to enjoy health insurance benefits and those sorts of things. We started with those sorts of discussions and efforts. We actually succeeded, but then those rights were stripped out by a court case, which was really sad. Then, interestingly, Governor Jesse Ventura was elected, and he very much believed in equality for LGBT people and their families, and so he actually just simply made those benefits available to state employees. Just rather than having that benefit negotiated through the contract, the union contract, he just offered that as a free offering. Unfortunately, what happened then, this was my first year in the legislature, the state legislature stripped that benefit out and eliminated it for state employees. So at kind of concurrently at the same time, there was a lot of organizing going on in other sectors, like the corporate sector. And I talked about, I used to work for a big financial services firm, a big Fortune 500, very conservative. Well, a lot of people were coming out of the closet in the corporate sector and engaging corporations in extending these benefits, and really making the argument that you're building a better workplace where your employees will be more productive, they'll be happier. You're also sending a signal to your potentially gay clients and customers that this is, you're a progressive company that's interested in in fairness and equality and, et cetera. It's good for business. And that process really started started a process of discernment started a larger public conversation, people really thinking about gay people not just as individuals who deserve to not be fired, but as families who also deserve family equality, sorts of things. A court case was brought in Hawaii, this is about 20 plus years ago, and the Hawaii Supreme Court said, you know what, it is fundamentally unfair and contrary to the Hawaii State Constitution to deny people the full rights of marriage. So Hawaii legislature, you need to create marriage for same-sex couples. Well, that immediately triggered an effort to amend the Constitution of the state of Hawaii to completely eliminate that legal possibility. That succeeded. So that avenue was cut off in Hawaii. And then that lit a fuse that burned for the next 10 or 15, 20 years, in which fully 31 states' constitutions were amended by their own citizens to prohibit the ability for same-sex couples to get married. Just shut it down as a function of constitutional rights. So we were denied, as full citizens of our state, of our country, legal rights in our Constitution. We were singled out for discrimination. It was a really, really difficult period to live through, because not only were those constitutional amendments successful, they also delivered a lot of electoral success to conservative candidates, because the people who turned out to vote for these constitutional amendments also then turned around and voted for conservative Republican candidates for the legislature, for Congress. And so it seemed like we were losing ground. But what happened, the paradox of that time was that it put an issue that we weren't prepared to really put front and center in the public, marriage, put it right there, right in the middle of the table, and it had to be dealt with, and we had to talk about it. So fast forward to about 10 years ago here in Minnesota, you probably heard of Michelle Bachmann. She used to be a member of Congress. She used to be a senator here, and I served with her, and she came to the legislature, and this was going to be her thing, that she was going to create a constitutional amendment. So it created this huge debate here in Minnesota. We kept it off the ballot for a number of years, but then in 2012, they succeeded in 2011, they succeeded putting on the 2012 ballot. We had the benefit by then of having lost 30 or so of these fights, and really understanding why we lost the fights. And also public opinion had moved quite a bit. They also gave us a full year and a half to get ready for the actual vote. And so we did a lot of research, and we figured out a couple things. One was lecturing people about rights and benefits and legal instrumentalities and inheritance and all that stuff really doesn't move people on the question of should people be allowed to get married or not. Because they think, just go to your attorney, get a will, get some legal documents, you got what you need. We also learned that getting angry with people and calling them homophobe if they don't agree with us, and making them feel bad about themselves also doesn't move them on the question of marriage. No one believes that they're a bad person. No one believes that they want to discriminate. What we learned was really approaching folks from a position of love and respect and patience and kindness, and inviting them into a conversation, starting with a question. Just saying to them, what does marriage mean to you? Why did you get married? Just talk about your marriage a little bit. And people would answer with these wonderful stories of falling in love and wanting to build a life together and wanting to provide for their family, and that invited folks into this wonderful interaction. And sometimes it took a little time, but we were able to respond by saying, well, exactly, that's what marriage is about. Why do you think gay people want to get married? What do you think when you think about why gay people want to get married? And people would answer, well, I don't know exactly why they want to get married. I think they want to inherit, they want rights of inheritance, and they want health care. And we're able to respond with, no, it's exactly what you just talked about.
Mm-hmm.
Because they're in love and they want to build a life together and they want the freedom to determine for themselves what their family looks like and the freedom to be free from the interference of government laws to say who they can marry and who they can't. And so we're able to allow people to see their own story in our story and take them on this journey, surface the tension that they feel around the issue and resolve it in a way that was consistent with the values and what they already believe about themselves. And so it was I think an amazing experience for me to go through, to see thousands of people engage in the campaign, talk to, have very scary conversations with people they love. I mean, it's hard to talk to your mom about something that you don't know how she's going to respond. And if she says, well, I don't think you should be able to get married, I mean, think how much that would hurt.
Yeah. So
people were really brave in having these conversations with, their friends and their family and the people they go to church with. But it moved literally thousands upon thousands of hearts and minds. Mm-hmm. And so I think there's a little lesson in there for us in this moment that we're in this country, because there's so much division, that if we can just slow down and have these respectful, loving conversations with people who might have voted for someone else for president and just understand the values that we share, mm-hmm. there might be something to learn here.
Okay. As a middle schooler who goes to a public school, I wanted to know what you think of the new Secretary of Education, Betsy DeVos.
Well, I think it's interesting that she's the new Secretary of Education responsible for the delivery of public education in our country, because I don't think she's ever even been inside a public school. Mm-hmm. And I think the process of the hearings that were held, in which she was asked a number of questions about, education, about public policy around education, around her beliefs about the separation of establishment of religion, church and state, show that she really doesn't have a broad enough command of the issues and the policies that she's going to be responsible for the entire country. So I think it's a shame that she's the new Secretary of Education, because I don't think she really understands the importance of what public education means, not just for delivering education, but public education has been a huge influence in the egalitarian nature of our democracy, where people of all classes and races and differences come together in one place to learn together about math and science and our history and our democracy. And so if we start going into more and more kind of separate parochial and sectarian and specialized schools, that kind of unifying force where we all kind of see ourselves as having much more in common is going to diminish. And I don't think she understands that about public education. And then also putting a lot of resources into religious schools that have no obligation, which is fine. I support freedom of religion, but I just don't support public tax dollars supporting those institutions where you can do or say or believe anything about anyone. You can choose who attends and who doesn't. That's not appropriate. So I'm not happy with her selection. On the other hand, the federal influence on our public education system is not huge, and so there's a lot we can do at the state level and the local level to protect the interests of public education.
Mm-hmm. What challenges do you think will come for gay people under the current administration?
Well, I think the president doesn't really care much either way about much of anyone or anything, and so I think what's most important to pay attention to are all of the people around him and what their attitudes are towards LGBTQ people. And I don't know that there's a single person who doesn't have a history of homophobia in their background as he's appointed to all of the cabinet level positions. And so at a minimum, the level of care and attention that's been paid to making sure that barriers are removed and safety, which the previous president tended to very closely. I think those will diminish and evaporate. For example, under Secretary Clinton, the Department of State recognized that people were, had to flee countries because of homophobic persecution and threat of death and the like, and they had, they were able to obtain refugee status on that basis. So I don't think that's going to continue. You see the Department of Justice in its defense of the executive order barring anti-transgender discrimination has been dropped, and so no longer will the effort to clear those sort of discriminatory barriers will be upheld by the federal government. So I think we're in for a rough patch.
Mm-hmm. And one more.
Mm-hmm.
If you do run for Congress, what will you do for Minnesotans?
Well, I am running for Congress if Keith Ellison is successful in his effort to become chair of the Democratic National Committee. And so what I would do is I would carry on much in the same way that I've, tried to fulfill what I think is very important, and that is try to continue to build this movement for social justice and freedom and equality of opportunity. That goes all the way back to my days of being in ACTA, the time that I served at City Hall as a city council member, and my time as a state senator. What I've always tried to do is be a servant leader and really be a resource and a place for folks who are building power for change, coming together, building coalitions, building efforts to enact laws, enact policies, create changes in our society that improve their lives. I would continue to do that. Keith Ellison has been doing that now as a member of Congress for 10 years, trying to mobilize and engage and excite people around the issues that affect their lives. I would continue to do that. A big part of that is trying to increase voter turnout. Participating in your democracy is fundamental. And he's transformed the 5th Congressional District from a low voter turnout district to a high voter turnout district. I would double down on that work and really look to making sure that even more people participate in voting who otherwise haven't historically in the past. Young people, communities of color, low-income folks, immigrants, and the like. And that's hard work. That's about going intentionally into community, finding people where they live, talking to them, and asking them what they care about, and making sure that they know how to access their own power. So that's what I hope to do.
Okay, well, thank you for your time.
Thank you.
It's been a lot of fun.
Yeah, likewise. So I hope you have a good day.